Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. So I want to continue talking about the Franciscan school of theology, particularly with John Duns Scotus and his kind of promotion of voluntarism, which voluntarism, the key word there is volum, which in Latin is the word for will, to will something. You can think of the English word to volunteer. Okay, it means you freely will to do something, basically. You're not coerced in any way. So voluntarism is the theological and philosophical understanding of man, of man's nature, that puts man's will primary over man's intellect. Now, St. Bonaventure has a theory of a tripartite soul, which includes the intellect, the will, and then what he calls the memory, which intellect and will, I think, should be fairly understood. Intellect is basically what you're able to use to understand things, I guess is a really simple way to put it. Will is how you decide certain things. And then memory, in Bonaventure's understanding, is the third part of the soul. And it's not memory how we use the word today. So this can get confusing for people. He understands memory as basically a vestige, a footprint, you could say, upon the soul of God. So it's like a memory that the soul has of God. And everything that the individual does, he is like seeking for God because of this aspect of memory within his soul. So when people talk about like the God-sized hole in your heart, that's kind of what Bonaventure means by memory, and he puts that as a part of the soul, and I think that's one reason why I really love Bonaventure. So, and from what I've heard, I haven't made it this far in reading Scotus yet. From what I've heard is that Scotus agrees with this tripartite soul with intellect, will, and memory, but yet he makes some distinctions, and I'm not clear yet on what those are. But Scotus, along with Bonaventure, they put the will in front of the intellect as basically as more important than the intellect. Whereas St. Thomas, he has an understanding of the soul which is bipartite, so two. I think some people also say dipartite, two. And so it only has the intellect and the will. And Thomas puts the intellect as primary above the will. And the Franciscans they look at that and they say, well, come on. I mean, St. Paul says, I know what is good, I know what I must do, but yet I do not do it. And I think Thomas's response is basically with concupiscence, that concupiscence is more in the intellect than it is in the will, and so it's because in some way, psychological way, that people don't understand. If they could only understand, they would do it. Pretty much, I think, is what Thomas would say in a nutshell. Whereas the Franciscan school says, no, I can understand fully what I need to do, but yet it can still be difficult to actually do it. So the will is primary in that way. And then when you get to the idea of voluntarism, more particularly, this is about not only because, so since the will is primary in the human being, and the human being's nature in their essence, you also need to take into account Duns Scotus's, so a lot of this is now coming from Duns Scotus, that his concept of univocity, which is univocity of the concept of being. So, and I've explained this, I think it was one of my first episodes, but I'll explain it here again just briefly. Univocity basically means that you can understand two things in the same way. You can use a word for something meaning the same thing by it. Okay? And this goes back to Aristotle's categories and all that sort of fun stuff. Univocity as opposed to equivocity. Equivocity is more of a like an analogized sort of distinction. Okay? An analogized sort of distinction. Where you say, this, you know, I say, let's see. I say my shirt is red because it's like the color red, whereas it's not actually the color red. Okay? So that would be an equivocal distinction. A univocal distinction would be, I guess you could say, my shirt is red because, well, I don't know if I can use the same analogy for this. A univocal distinction. Let's just go back to the question. Let's just go back to the question at hand. With regard to being. So, an equivocal distinction of being between God and man, let's say, would be that man's being is only like God's. They can't be understood in the same way. It's only like a metaphor, basically. It is kind of a way you can understand it. Whereas univocity would say, the definition of being as regards man and the definition of being as regards God are the same thing. So where does this get back to voluntarism? Well, if in man, and this kind of boils down to morality as well. If in man, the main part of the soul that is the moral agent, that is the one that acts morally, if that is the will, then because of this concept of univocity between the being of God and man, then the will must also be the main moral agent, the main actor in God as well. And so you say, well, okay, if the main moral agent in God is his will, then what God wills is what is good, instead of what is good is what God wills. You get what I mean? So this is kind of one of the main distinctions between the Thomist and the Franciscan school. Now, John Duns Scotus does have a nuanced understanding of this voluntarism. He's not like a total divine command theorist or something. He does say that is determined by God's will, except the first 3 commandments of the Decalogue, which are the first 3 of the 10 commandments. So, love the Lord your God. What are they? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, and remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So basically, Scotus is saying those 3 commandments are not willed by God, because that would kind of be a contradiction. Because then that would mean we only love God because God wills it, and somehow God could will us not to love Him, and that'd be a good thing. No, Scotus denies that whole idea. Okay, he denies that because of the way that he understands this voluntarism, which it's not looking at the will as some sort of judgment, or think of a gavel. It's not like I command blah blah blah. Okay, that's not how he looks at the will. He looks at the will as love. And this is how Bonaventure looks at it too, and the whole Franciscan school. It's not the will in the sense of command. It's the will in the sense of love. So, because God loves something, it is good. Not because God commands it, I guess would be the distinction. Because God loves something, it is good. So, and then going with the first 3 commandments of the Decalogue, God has to love Himself. Because in the Christian understanding of God, God is love, and all that kind of fun stuff that Augustine talks about, right? So, it wouldn't work to say that God could command you not to love Him, because that would be self-contradictory in what the nature of God is and what the nature of reality is. Okay, so that's why the first 3 commandments are not considered as being based upon God's command. Okay. Now the other 7, I think Scotus does kind of say that those could be changed to a certain extent. I'm sure he has some nuance here. Those could be changed to a certain extent by God's will. But the first 3 commandments, which regard God Himself, are not able to be changed, because then inherently within that would cause a contradiction. Okay? Because of Scotus's and the Franciscan school's understanding of what the will is, that the will is the loving action of God. Not just some sort of intellectual, this is right and therefore it is. Okay? That would be like a truly divine command theory. But it's more of God loves something and therefore it is good. Okay? And I think Scotus would probably also say something like, this would seem weird if goodness existed coincident with God at the same time with God. Because that's kind of what, at least in my understanding of it, that's kind of a question that pops up in the Thomistic view, is if what is good depending on whether God wills it or not, then how can it be good? Is it just good in and of itself in some way? Even beyond what God can do? And that's kind of a sticky question, sticky subject. So I think Scotus makes a very good distinction. And he's called the subtle doctor for a reason. because he's subtle. He makes lots of distinctions between things. And he's not a full voluntarist. He's a voluntarist for the last 7 commandments as regards humanity, but not as regards the commandments for God, because then, again, like I've said, this creates a contradiction. So, I hope this is making sense. This is kind of the first time I'm really able to lay these thoughts out as I've learned them about the Franciscan school and Scotus and Bonaventure. So I hope this hasn't come off as confusing. Forgive me if it does. I'll be sure to clarify more in the future. So I hope this is helpful, and let me know what you think. Feel free to email me at my email. I always put it in the description of every video. Check me out on Anchor.fm, Player FM, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those other things that I've listed there. I also have a Facebook page, Twitter page. You can find me at PZ Catechesis. PZ Catechesis, just like my initials, Parker Zerbal, Catechesis. So, yeah, alright, thanks. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Card channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Catholicism Card. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.